welcome to Makerspace Podcast. My name is Ray Craggy.
And I'm Ian Charnas.
And today we'll be sharing with you some interviews that we did at ISAM 2018.
Ray, what the heck is ISAM?
ISAM is the International Symposium on Academic Makerspaces, a conference put on by the Higher Education Makerspace Initiative that in 2018 was held at Stanford University.
Today you'll hear from leaders from academic makerspaces all around the nation, so you can get a sense for what's being discussed at the International Symposium on Academic Makerspaces and decide if you're ready to start attending this important conference.
My name's Aaron Hoover, and I'm an associate professor of mechanical engineering at Olin College of Engineering in Needham, Massachusetts. Sure, we've got a space called the Shop at Olin, which is really an assemblage of a lot of different spaces, and we can do everything in that space from hot metal work, welding, things like that, milling, turning, to woodwork and prototyping with plastics and CNC machining as well. Initially, we were a traditional machine shop and open 9 to 5, and there had to be a professional machinist present for anyone to use the space. And now we're moving more toward an open access approach where if we have qualified students around after hours, then certain machines and equipment can be used after hours as well. One thing I'm particularly proud of is the way that you can read the space when you enter it. So it's everything from signage to tool organization, kind of the legibility of the space. It's something we still have a long way to go, but I'm really proud that students are thinking about constructing the space in a way that communicates what's possible and not creating a space where you feel alienated if you don't automatically know how to use something or know where something is. So that's something that I think is sort of environmental design that I'm really excited about and that I think we're doing a good job of. It's kind of fun, silly stuff like when you normally enter a space where you need safety glasses, you got the yellow sign with the glasses on it, or you got the caution tape, like the black and yellow striped caution tape. But instead of doing that caution tape, we actually had a student make custom caution tape with a vinyl cutter. So we bought just plain yellow tape, and then she drew silhouettes of kind of funky safety glasses, and then we arrayed those on the tape. So when you walk up to the space, you see tape with safety glasses on it, and it just immediately oh, this is where I put the safety glasses on. Little things like that. I think, getting students really psyched about just customizing something that could be totally mundane. We could have gone on McMaster-Carr and bought the standard safety sign, but we gave students kind of the artistic license to have a hand in doing that.
Hi, my name is Catherine Schroyer. I'm a PhD student at University of Washington. One of the primary learning modes that we use in our makerspace is asking and answering questions. So you come in for a tour, you're shown everything, you get a safety orientation, you can take workshops. But primarily, if you want to learn, you come in and you seek your own resources and you ask questions. And so for some people, that is great and that works. But for people who are maybe new to making or a little more timid or just have different learning styles, trying to find more redundancy in information and finding ways to kind of unfold information for people, I think, can be really helpful. So when you have a verbal exchange with people, it's ephemeral. It goes away. You have to remember what I asked the mentor yesterday about how to use this tool. You have to remember last week what was that first step that I did to turn on the laser cutter. So if we can have things that are persistent in the space, so signage might be persistent and persistent across people. So things that anyone who comes to the space can access rather than having to seek out an expert and have these conversations over and over again. Yeah, so I think what's interesting and appealing to me about design is it gives you the power to think about how you might change the world rather than just be a participant in something that is already existing. Before I was a PhD student, I was working at MIT running informal education for high school students. And so I ran a summer camp where we built underwater vehicles as a means to teach ocean engineering and to start learning design principles. And I had a student who, she didn't have any robotics clubs or things at her school, and she came and we had a week-long camp, and she went back and felt like because she had learned and built things together with people and felt more comfortable making, that she could go back and start her own club. So she started a club and then found some faculty members, at her high school that she could bring on board, and eventually started a class. And now it's this huge thing. So I think for her, there was this huge shift in mindset from I'm good at class and I can be a good student, to, oh, I can make things. And it wasn't just I can make this vehicle, it was I can go back and change my whole school. My school doesn't have a robotics program, fine, I'm going to start one. They're not used to having the autonomy, I think. You have to relearn this autonomy of what do I care about, and what do I want to build in the world, and what do I want to accomplish. And so for me, I think this design mindset, prototyping mindset that we see in makerspaces and project-based learning helps people shift this framing from I'm just a passenger in the school system, I'm a passenger in the world, to I can start to be an active player in what we're building in the world.
I'm Marlo Cohn. I work at Stanford University with the Product Realization Lab. I'm a lecturer in mechanical engineering, and I'm the associate director of the lab. The Product Realization Lab is a 9,000 square foot teaching lab on Stanford campus with 5 distinct lab areas. We're open to all Stanford students, and we encourage personal projects, curricular projects, and research work. So there are a couple things that we're working on. One of them is my colleague Dan Soman is doing constantly a lot of work with documentation. So documentation is something we always put a lot of effort into. For example, taking our injection molding machine, which has about a 1,400-page manual that's in 2 massive binders, and condensing that into a more accessible 26-page document that we can give to students. So when I started working at Stanford 8 years ago, I was hired to set up our rapid prototyping space called Room 36. And I had in mind that we should start slowly and buy equipment gradually. But I bought a few things that I thought would be cool and useful, or somebody else told me would be cool and useful, that just didn't really make sense in the context of our students. One of those was a large binocular microscope. Wasn't extremely expensive, about $800. But it barely got used, and we ended up sharing it with a research lab on campus. Instead, we used a $200 USB microscope that has lights, can take pictures really easily, and that was used constantly by the students for doing project teardowns and was much more useful.
I'm Craig Forrest. I'm an associate professor of mechanical engineering at Georgia Tech. Well, there's a couple directions that are sort of coming out of the Invention Studio. One is we're taking on increasingly complex equipment, and students are showing they can embrace that. $100,000 3D printers, metal cutting, laser cutters, things like that. We have increased complexity with our staffing, given we have now over 100 student volunteers that run the space. How do you maintain a community when not everybody knows each other? And the third area that I'll mention that is sort of emerging is campus cooperation amongst other makerspaces. So the Invention Studio is no longer the only game in town at Georgia Tech. There are now about half a dozen similar makerspaces on campus, and we don't want to compete. We want the students to feel that they can move seamlessly between them to get their work done. So how do you create a sort of super community, a federated model of some kind, like the United States, but the United Makerspaces of Georgia Tech or something? How do you foster that and truly have friends and colleagues and money flowing and people flowing seamlessly across what is a relatively suburban campus in the heart of Atlanta? The thing that makes me most happy is when I hear stories about former students becoming the person they wanted to be through the Invention Studio. So, for example, Chris Quintero, former president of the Invention Studio, he now works at Bolt in Boston. It's a hardware accelerator. The Invention Studio fundamentally changed his life trajectory and allowed him to become who he wanted to be. So, to have been a part of, such an impactful episode in his life is just, it's really what wakes us up in the morning, I think.
Vince Wilczynski from Yale University. I'm the James S. Tyler Director of the Yale Center for Engineering, Innovation, and Design. The Yale CEID 9,700 square feet of making capability open to everyone at the university. We host classes, workshops, and have students from all of our undergraduate programs as well as our graduate students in the professional schools. So we have an interesting class that's underway this next semester for the second time where it combines architecture and engineering. and to have faculty members from the School of Architecture, from the School of Engineering collaborating, but more so the students from those two different professional schools that are working together on a project, it brings out the best of the engineering technology world and the best of the architecture world to focus on a technology-based solution for a problem in architecture. So this class actually, its origin is reflective of the value of community of makers at large. So the origin of this class was an alum. And the alum came to us with a connection, in this case, of a problem at the Smithsonian Institute's Arts and Industry building on the National Mall that needed a technology-based solution. So with that start of a problem from a committed alum, we actually then reached out to our colleagues in engineering and architecture and put together the format to find that solution. One of the things we're very, very proud of is actually our distribution of students. Whether you look at that on the graduate versus undergraduate, whether you look at that as the undergraduate disciplines, whether you look at that as male versus female, whether you look at that as Republicans versus Democrats versus independents, is that the distribution is equal pretty much across all of those ranges. So our ability to get a broad section, a diverse section of the university together making is something that we're very, very proud of.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Hunt. I'm the Associate Director of Project Manus and Maker IT Guru at MIT. So MIT has over 45 different spaces run by various departments. Project Manus oversees 2 spaces right now. One is focused on training freshmen on basic maker technologies of laser cutters, 3D printers, bandsaws, drill press, and hand tools, and that's called the Maker Lodge. We are now also building another space that has yet to be named that is built around increasing the skill and practice of students and staff and faculty at MIT around making and the technologies involved with that. One of the challenges that we've faced in the spaces is getting the infrastructure right in terms of utilities like electricity, and paying upfront to have flexibility in that is a critical challenge to overcome earlier rather than later. We have a number of pieces of equipment that draw a fair bit of power, like laser cutters and some higher end 3D printers, and we were using shared utilities with other rooms around the space, and we've had circuits flip all the time. We then went to install additional electrical capacity in the room. For cost reasons, we did not extend that all the way across the room because it was several $1,000s less. That's something that has come back and become a challenge again as some of the activities in the neighboring rooms picked up and they're pulling more power that they hadn't been pulling in the previous years. The most exciting piece I find for the Makerspaces is learning from the students themselves, to get them involved in the problem solving. We may have ideas, and we had some plans, and we drew up initial layouts of the space. We showed them to the students, they implemented them, and then a week later they changed them. They moved things around, and we looked at it and it's like, okay, that makes sense. They had reasoning. To let the students and the makers themselves have ownership of the space in a way that they can change it. If they see something that could be better, to have systems in place that enable them to take that idea to the next level, and if it makes sense around to the community, to make that change happen. Coming in and thinking we have all the answers, even after years of experience, the makers and the students, they're a very creative bunch. They have really great ideas, and sometimes we have to let them try them out, even if we have a good sense that they're going to fail. As long as we have those failures controlled and we support them in fixing them when they do happen and helping them learn from them. Because when we're making, it doesn't work the first time ever. And so it's really important to let them try and experiment on things and then to be able to iterate and improve upon that and to learn throughout the process.
I'm Barbara Comignoni. I'm the co-director of the Making Center at Parsons. I run the media resources side of things. It's always important to have some type of record of what people are using. By observing how they're used and by pulling metrics per semester, we see what gets used when. It also gives us the ability to plan so that we know we're running certain intensives during the fall. We can't offer open access because we have to meet curricular need first, but come the spring, we can open it up and we can have a broader range of students use that equipment. It also helps us make cases for bigger and better pieces of equipment. If we know we have X amount of users that are interested in this type of equipment, say video or VR, it makes it that much easier to get the funding so that we could support the student need.
My name is Tara Radnicki, and I'm actually the engineering librarian at De La Mare Science and Engineering Library at the University of Nevada, Reno. We're a makerspace in a library, and so librarians are trained, and we train our student employees to do what we call research consultations. And we mimic that service, providing technology type of consultations, which is really common now in makerspaces. We call ours tech wranglers, and we train them by having what we call a reference interview. So we teach our tech wranglers what questions to ask. So someone comes in and says, I want to make this. And we ask, why do you want to make that? Do you know what you want to use to make that? Maybe we can talk about what would be the best options. And it's really about asking questions so you can actually get at the heart of what that patron actually needs. Our makerspace is actually in a science and engineering library that only about 6-7 years ago had very few people that ever walked into it. And so my boss was really able to rejuvenate that space, really organize it, brought in a makerspace. And now we have students from all different disciplines coming into this building that was really traditionally only science and maybe engineers spending time in there. And we've done that through programming. We've done that through student employment selection. We are very conscious of who we are hiring in our space. We want to make sure we're representing not only students from diverse disciplines of study, but diverse backgrounds to make sure that everybody feels welcomed. We're actually returning our attention to privacy in the makerspace and intellectual property in the makerspace. So I'm also a patent and trademark librarian through the USPTO's PTRC program. And so when I started looking at how can we talk about intellectual property in the makerspace without just doing the negative angle of please don't rip off somebody's logo, that's trademark infringement. Please don't, sell something that you've 3D printed if it's patented elsewhere, things like that. And instead, we're looking at how can we help students and faculty and community members who come in and they're creating new intellectual property in our space every day. How can we support that? How can we educate them about their rights as intellectual property holders? Those sorts of things. And then coming with that, we came back to privacy again, which is really an important concept in librarianship in general. And so the makerspace is a very public space, just like most, but we do try to take steps to make sure everything's anonymized. We don't want people's 3D prints to have their name attached to them, for example. And if somebody wants their 3D print done, so quote unquote in the dark, we're happy to turn the lights off on our Stratasys, put a piece of paper up, whatever we need to protect that intellectual property that maybe they're developing that they want to pursue elsewhere through some field of entrepreneurship.
That's all for today. Tune in next time for more Makerspace management tips. Until then, I'm Ian Charnas.
And I'm Ray Craggy, and this has been Makerspace Podcast. See you next time.
If you find this show valuable, please take 60 seconds and subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes or YouTube. If you can raise the visibility of Makerspace Podcast, it helps people find this show and join the conversation. Finally, if you know someone who is building or running a makerspace or thinking about it, consider sharing this with them.
You can find us online at makerspacepodcast.com or send us an email with your questions and feedback to info@makerspacepodcast.com. Special thanks to Kate Hart for our theme music.